We're getting close to the end. It gets very messy at the end.
You need to finish this. You need to break the cycle. Your children deserve to go home.
What happens next?
There is no plan B.
Everyone here is gonna die.
We can't just give up.
All right, then tell me how to move forward.
There's nowhere for you to hide. Now I light the match, and I watch it burn.
With the Season 4 finale of From now released, and Season 5 officially confirmed as the show's final chapter, every single person in that town is about to die. And the terrifying thing is, this time around, there might not be a single thing they can do to stop it. The talismans are gone, the monsters are free to roam wherever they want. Fatima has crossed over to the other side. Boyd is falling apart both physically and mentally. And somewhere out there in the dark, the man in yellow is wearing a dead man's face and nobody in the town even knows it yet. Season 4 ended in a way that basically lit a fuse. And Season 5 is going to be the explosion. The final season. The last chapter. And when you piece together everything that the show has been laying down since the very beginning, and then there's what Sophia said in the finale, which I keep coming back to because it's about as direct a piece of foreshadowing as this show has ever given us. She said it's gone dark because we're almost at the end. She said it gets real messy at the end. And then she said she'll light the match and watch it burn. Now when you combine that with what the boy in white sang to Tabitha and Henry back in episode 3 of Season 4, about them running out of time and approaching the end, it starts to paint a very clear picture. The end that the show is building towards isn't a quiet resolution. It's a massacre. It's fire. It's blood. It's exactly what Victor witnessed all those years ago when he hid while everyone around him was slaughtered. What we don't actually know yet is what triggers the massacre or exactly how it unfolds. We know from what Victor saw and from what Julie witnessed during her storywalking that the man in yellow was feasting. He was at the center of it all. Which means the massacre isn't just a random monster attack that spirals out of control. It feels far more deliberate than that. It feels like it's almost part of the cycle's design. Like the cycle doesn't just end with people dying, it ends with the man in yellow making sure of it. And that's what makes it so chilling going into the final season, because if the massacre is something that the man in yellow orchestrates rather than something that just happens, then the group isn't just fighting monsters anymore. They're fighting something that has done this many times before and has never lost. I think the way Season 5 is going to play this is by building a central question around whether it can be stopped. Because that's where the drama lives. If Victor and Julie both know what's coming, and they do at this point, then they're going to be the ones trying to warn the rest of the town. But telling people that a massacre is on the horizon isn't exactly going to go down smoothly, especially given how fractured and stressed and barely holding together everyone already is. The tension between people believing them and people falling apart or refusing to accept it is going to be one of the major pressure points of the season. And meanwhile the clock is ticking because Sophia has already removed the talismans, and the man in yellow is already moving his pieces into place. The massacre has always been the end point of the cycle. It's always been what happens when the town reaches its conclusion. And if breaking the cycle means preventing the massacre, then that becomes the mission of the entire final season. But here's what makes it even more complicated. What if the massacre can't be stopped from within the cycle? What if breaking the cycle requires something far more drastic than just surviving the night? That's the question I think Season 5 is going to force these characters to answer. And I genuinely don't think everyone is going to make it to the other side of that answer. Fatima becoming a monster is one of the most layered and complicated things the show has ever done with a character. And I think Season 5 is going to push that to its absolute limit. Because on the surface, you might look at her transformation and think this is the worst possible thing that could have happened. And in some ways it is. But when you zoom out and think about what Fatima actually represents now within the structure of the show, it starts to feel like her transformation might end up being one of the most important developments heading into the final season. Let me start with what we know. Fatima transformed at the end of Season 4, and she said to Boyd and the others, "Remember who I was." That line is doing a lot of work. It's telling us that she's aware she's changing. She knows what she's becoming. But the fact that she said "remember who I was" rather than just losing herself completely suggests that there's still something of Fatima in there. There's still a version of her that is fighting to hold on to who she was. And that gives the show enormous room to explore what she is now. What I think is going to happen in Season 5 is that we'll find out Fatima exists in a kind of hybrid state. She hasn't fully given herself over to being a monster the way the others have. She's somewhere in between, which is genuinely unprecedented in the show's history as far as we know. And the fact that she's already shown the ability to sense monsters, to see where they are, and to even influence Smiley when he was about to attack, tells us that this isn't just a tragedy for the group. It's potentially a weapon. Fatima might end up being the thing that gives the residents a fighting chance against the monsters in a way they've never had before. Think about what that means practically. The group has always been on the back foot when it comes to the monsters. They've had talismans and walls and community, but they've never been able to actually fight back in any meaningful way. Fatima changes that dynamic entirely. If she can sense when the monsters are coming, if she can interfere with them or influence them, then suddenly the residents have an asset they've never had before heading into what is going to be the most dangerous night of their lives. It's almost like the show spent 2 seasons setting her up as someone who was becoming something other, all the way back to the dirt-eating storyline in Season 3, and now it's finally paying that off. But here's where it gets complicated, and honestly this is the part one find most interesting. Even if Fatima is willing and able to fight on the side of the residents, not everyone is going to trust her. She's a monster now. Whatever she is, she's no longer fully human in the way that the others are. And in a town that has spent years being terrorized by monsters, asking people to put their faith in something that has crossed over to the other side is going to be an enormous ask. I think there's going to be a significant storyline in Season 5 around the group being divided on what to do with Fatima. Whether to treat her as an ally, or whether to fear her the same way they fear the others. And then there's the deeper question of why she became a monster in the first place. Because I don't think it was random. Nothing in From is random. My feeling is that it's connected to the fact that she gave her child to the town. Smiley is her son, and the act of that child being taken from her and consumed by whatever the town does to people. That mirrors the kind of sacrifice that the original monsters made to gain their immortality all those years ago. The town took something from Fatima in the most profound way imaginable. And in return, it made her part of itself. That's a dark trade-off, and one that I think the show is going to explore in some depth in the final season. There's also the question of whether Fatima will ever be able to leave if the group does eventually find a way out. Because she's not just trapped the way the others are anymore. She's woven into the fabric of the town itself in a way that none of them are. Even if the cycle breaks and the doors open, what does that mean for someone who is now part of whatever the town is? That's a question I don't think has an easy answer, and it might be one of the most heartbreaking threads of the entire final season. The final image of Season 4 was the man in yellow and the boy in white acknowledging each other. And I've been thinking about that moment ever since because of how much it shifted the way I understand the whole show. For a long time, the man in yellow has felt like the central antagonist, the big threat, the thing the group is ultimately up against. But that final moment recontextualizes everything because it makes it clear that the man in yellow isn't just a monster or a villain. He's one half of something much larger. And the boy in white is the other half. The way they stood and acknowledged each other, it felt almost symbolic. Like two forces that have existed in opposition for as long as the town itself has. And I think that's exactly what they are. The boy in white said to Sophia, "You're going to lose this time." Which tells us a few things. First, it tells us that this has happened before. Many times before. The boy in white and the man in yellow have been doing this back and forth across cycle after cycle. And it's never been fully resolved. Second, it tells us that the boy in white believes this is the cycle where things change. That this is the one where good actually wins. And third, it makes me wonder if the town itself is the arena where this eternal conflict plays out, rather than just a prison or a mystery to be solved. What I've started to wonder is whether the town is actually an entity unto itself, something alive and aware, and the boy in white and the man in yellow are essentially its two sides. The lightning bolts and the earthquake that happened in the finale felt like the town responding and reacting, almost like it was fighting back against what Sophia was doing. If that's the case, then the boy in white and the man in yellow aren't making decisions independently so much as they're acting out roles that the town has assigned them. They're servants of something bigger. Which would explain why the cycle has persisted for so long, Because it's not just one entity choosing to run it. It's the town itself that perpetuates it, with these two forces ensuring that the cycle plays out the same way every time. But something feels different this time around. The boy in white's warning to Sophia, and his confidence that she's going to lose, suggests that the balance has shifted. And I think the bones being brought to the surface is part of why. Because the bones were clearly resting in a specific ritualistic location. And now they've been disturbed. Which makes me wonder if the immortality that the monsters were granted all those years ago is tied to them remaining in that location. If it is, then bringing the bones to the surface might mean that the bargain has been broken. And if the bargain has been broken, the monsters might no longer be truly immortal. Which would be a massive shift in the power dynamic heading into the final season. If the group can actually kill the monsters, rather than just surviving them, then everything changes. And then there's the man in yellow posing as Elgin. Because when Sophia killed Elgin, she told Clara to get rid of the body and make sure nobody found out about it. And the only reason I can think that she would want to hide that is because she's planning to let the man in yellow take his place. We know from earlier in the show that the man in yellow can pose as anyone he's killed within the town's history. And now Elgin is on that list. So heading into season 5, there's a very real possibility that someone who looks and sounds exactly like Elgin is walking around the town, and nobody except Sophia knows the truth. That kind of deception from within is exactly what the show does best. And I think it's going to create some devastating moments before the truth eventually comes out. Let's talk about who I think is going to die in the final season, because the show has never been shy about killing off major characters, and in a final season that's building towards a massacre, I don't think anyone is fully safe. But there are some that feel more certain than others. Clara is the one I feel most confident about. She is absolutely doomed and I don't think the show is even trying to hide it. She's been drawn into the orbit of the man in yellow, she's being manipulated, and she doesn't have enough of the picture to understand the full danger she's in. The man in yellow is going to use her for exactly as long as she's useful, and then he'll discard her. That's been the pattern with everyone he's gotten close to, and I don't see any reason why Clara would be the exception. The tragedy of her arc is that she probably thinks she's making choices that are going to help her survive when in reality, every step she's taking is leading her closer to the end. Henry is another one I've been worried about for a long time. And that worry intensified significantly after season 4. His mental state is deteriorating in a way that feels irreversible. He can't distinguish reality from what the man in yellow is showing him. He doesn't feel like he has a purpose anymore. And Victor spoke about someone walking off a roof in a previous cycle, which I've always thought was foreshadowing for Henry. The man in yellow is going to keep playing games with his mind, keep pushing him further towards the edge. And I think Henry is eventually going to break completely. It's going to be one of the most tragic deaths the show has had because Henry genuinely wants to protect his family. And he simply isn't going to be able to hold himself together long enough to do it. Boyd is the most controversial prediction I have, but I genuinely believe it's coming. Boyd's arc across the entire show has been about guilt, about the weight of the people he hasn't been able to save, about trying to be the protector of a group that increasingly doesn't trust him. His tremors are getting worse and his ability to lead is being questioned more and more. I don't think Boyd survives the final season. But more than that, I don't think he dies in a way that feels random or sudden. I think Boyd sacrifices himself. He stays behind when others get out. He gives everything he has left to make sure that someone else makes it. Because Boyd killed Abby, the love of his life, and I don't think he ever gets past that. Even if the doors open tomorrow, I don't think Boyd would step through them. He doesn't feel like he deserves to go back to a world where she isn't waiting for him. His death isn't going to be the man in yellow or the monsters. His death is going to be his own choice. And that's the most devastating kind. Julie's storywalking is something that I think is going to be absolutely central to the final season in a way that might even exceed what we saw in season 4. Because when you really think about what her ability means, and what she's already managed to do with it, the potential of it is staggering. She can walk through the history of the town. She can see things that happened before any of the current residents ever arrived. She can go back to the original moments that set everything in motion. That's not just a cool ability. That is the single most powerful tool the group has ever had when it comes to understanding what the town is and why it exists. And the most important thing she's already seen is the massacre. She story-walked to it. She witnessed it. She knows what it looked like, and she knows that the man in yellow was at the center of it. Which means she has information that nobody else in the group has. Combined with what Victor knows from living through the aftermath of it himself, the two of them together have more knowledge about the massacre than anyone else in the town's current cycle. And the question for Season 5 is whether they can use that knowledge to prevent it from happening again, or whether they're going to discover that what they saw was a warning rather than something that can be changed. I think Julie is going to push herself further with the storywalking in the final season out of necessity and out of grief. She lost her father. She briefly believed she'd lost her mother too. She's been through more than almost anyone in that group, and she has this ability that she hasn't fully explored yet. I think she's going to storywalking back to earlier cycles, looking for patterns, looking for the moments where things could have gone differently. She might even see the original Sophia, which would immediately confirm to her that the Sophia currently in the town is not who she claims to be. That would be a massive revelation, and one that could shift the entire dynamic of the group's understanding of who the enemy actually is. What I find really interesting about the storywalking is that it connects directly to what Nkui has always been about. Nkui provides knowledge. It's been established as something that exists in the town as a form of guidance or access to truth. And Julie literally has the ability to access that truth directly, to walk into the past and see it for herself. That's an enormous advantage heading into the final season. The group has always been reactive, always scrambling for answers that arrive too late. Julie's storywalking could change that. It could allow them to be one step ahead for the first time in the show's history. Whether that's enough to break the cycle is another question entirely. This is the question that I keep coming back to more than any other when I think about what the final season needs to accomplish. Because we've heard about breaking the cycle for a long time now. And it feels like the endpoint that the show is building towards. But what does it actually mean? And what would it cost? The cycle appears to operate in a specific way. People get trapped in the town. They try to survive. The monsters terrorize them. The man in yellow manipulates and corrupts. The boy in white tries to help. Things build towards the massacre. The massacre occurs. And then eventually, after some unknown period of time, a new group of people gets pulled in, and it all starts over again. Hundreds of years of this. Hundreds of cycles. And as far as we know, none of them has ever broken it. So what would breaking it require? I think it would require something that has never happened in any previous cycle. Something unprecedented. And I think that something might be directly connected to the bones being brought to the surface, and to what happens with the monster immortality. If the bargain that gave the monsters their power has been broken or weakened by the bones being disturbed, then maybe this cycle is the first one where the residents actually have a genuine chance of fighting back. Of not just surviving but actively overcoming the forces that have always consumed every group before them. But I also think breaking the cycle might require a sacrifice of some kind. The town demands things. It always has. And I don't think it's going to let go of its grip on this world without something being given up in return. Whether that's a person or a choice or some kind of action that can't be undone. I don't know. But I do think the final season is going to force its characters into an impossible position where the only way out is through something that costs them deeply. And that's what makes it such compelling storytelling. Because breaking the cycle isn't going to be a victory that feels clean or easy. It's going to be something that the characters carry with them long after the show ends.